from San Diego. That's my hometown. Dr. May, I had a question for you. You mentioned in your written testimony that NIST's involvement in the smart grid is a prime example of how NIST combines its core research capability with extensive stakeholder engagement to drive technology adoption. So the Smart Grid Interoperability Panel, which you created, is a private-public partnership that develops standards for technologies that modernize the electric power grid. So we're going to face that in other kind of sectors. So I was kind of curious if you'd tell us what was the process that you used to incorporate and ensure industry input, so that you're working with industry to make sure that you got the appropriate information.
Okay, and first of all, let me define standards, because the English language sort of uses the same word to define, at least in this case, two things. In our measurement standards, we are the authoritative source, so we do the underpinning measurement to support our measurement standards. For our documentary standards, and we typically use the same word, this is by a consensus process. In the United States, actually, industry leads our standards making process, and we are simply a facilitator. So with respect to the Smart Grid, we did both. We served as a convener for the Smart Grid Interoperability Panel, and actually we've spun that off. We led that effort until it got mature, working with the industry to agree on and adopt documentary standards, protocols and codes that would be useful in the smart grid. And then in our laboratory work, we actually did research in our physical measurements laboratory, primarily, to provide the standards, measurement standards that would allow the development and implementation, for example, of smart meters and sensors that would be used on the smart grid. So we use our responsibility as a convener for the development of documentary standards, working with the industry, and then we use our laboratory-based measurement activity to develop standards for the devices that would actually operate on the smart grid and conform to these documentary standards that we've developed.
And did any of the stakeholder companies express any concern about sharing their information with NIST or with the other companies that might have been involved?
Well,
and if so, how did you deal with that?
Well, obviously, people are reticent going in. We, when necessary, can sign non-disclosure agreements, but in this case, that really wasn't necessarily. The documentary standards that we develop only work at the sort of pre-competitive level. We're sort of trying to allow the laws of the land, if you will, and those that all players agree to adhere to. And they, in this process, don't usually have to divulge any proprietary information.
Is when you're doing standards, I suppose that makes sense, because it's sort of early in the game. Do you think that the voluntary standards, the voluntary approach has worked well for NIST?
It has worked well. It is the process that we use in the United States. It stood the test of time.
Okay. I appreciate, again, both of you gentlemen for being here. Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.